a methodology introduced by Leontief, and Leontief actually won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1973 for this particular type of analysis. Now, once you understand the input-output analysis, there are lots of things that you can do to examine how different industrial sectors of your economy is linked to other industrial sectors. So for example, you guys are interested in construction, it will give you a very detailed tool to analyze the construction industry. It applies all over the world, so it's not only in Indonesia. If you have your Indonesian input-output tables, you can look at Indonesia. There are global input-output tables produced for something like 40 countries in the world, and that's also available online. So if you have the time, if you have the interest, you can examine how different sectors of the economy operates across different countries and also across the world. Now, I have the file that I've shared with you is actually a small file, so it's still not too bad. You can still crunch the numbers on your computer, but sometimes on a larger file, you need a very powerful computer to make sure all these things run. So we will be looking at input-output theory. So that's basically how the output from one industry is then used as input into another industry. It allows us to examine the linkages between construction to the rest of the national economy and the underlying production processes. So for example, if you think about the construction industry, you have timber, you have bricks, and as Pak Budi was talking earlier, you can have your steel products produced in Indonesia in the manufacturing sector and then used in the construction industry. Pak Budi also says that a research student in your construction management class have done the research and they found that some steel products are also imported from overseas. So we can also look at imports and how these imports fit into the overall construction economy, okay? So the economic data will be considered that we will look at can also be used not only to look at materials, you can also use it to look at labor, how much labor goes into the construction industry. Now, if you start to think about this, this is a very powerful tool. So if you are interested in environmental sustainability, if you think about carbon, right? If you think about energy being produced by burning coal, but the energy sector is not directly supplying to the construction industry, it supplies to all industries. Now, using this tool, you can also see the link between power generation using coal or using fuel oil, using diesel, using solar panels, using wind, and see how those environmental factors or environmental indicators can be linked into your overall national economy. So it's a very powerful tool. And what I'm going to do is demonstrate this to you during this session. So we have 3 hours. I'm hoping that I can demonstrate all that in 3 hours. If not, we may go a little bit over time, or if you guys prefer, we can continue next week. So the objective of today's lecture is number one, how to use input-output tables, I'll then describe a theoretical framework for macro scale examination of the construction industry. We will appreciate how the construction is placed within your national economy. So how large is construction relative to all the other sectors of the economy? I believe you guys understand that construction is one of the largest contributors to GDP, and that's why we are really concerned about construction industry. We will give you the tools to evaluate construction construction strategies at industry and also at project level. So it becomes a very useful tool for students and also for researchers to have a look at where or how the industry is going to develop. Now, we spoke about this previously in terms of macroeconomics. We said that there were 3 main sectors of economy that we look at. Number one is household. So this is where all of us are. We earn our monthly salary. We spend our salary on housing, on transportation, on food. So that's what households do. We earn a wage. So you can see over here, wages come into the household, and then we spend money on consumables, on food, on transport, on housing, and we buy things. We go to the cinema, and that's how we spend money. Now we also save our money, so that's savings. We also pay tax, okay, which will then be transferred to government expenditure. The other sector of the economy is what we call government, and they are the ones that collects taxes from us and spends the tax collected by providing services to the citizens. So that comes as hospitals, as schools, as police, and as defense. You also have companies or corporations. So they are another sector of the economy where they will make profits and produce goods and services. So those, just broadly, just remember that there are three actors within the national economy, and this is how they interact. So most of the time they would be interacting in the market where we determine prices for goods bought and sold. We will also be looking at GDP, unemployment rates, and price indices later on. So if you have questions about that, please just unmute yourself and ask those questions, okay? Now, I've answered this question in an earlier session. Somebody asked me what's the difference between GNI and GDP. So let me reiterate this again. Gross national income was previously called gross national product. It's an aggregate value of all final goods and services produced by a country's factors of production. So I think I've given you this example previously. If it's an Indonesian company operating in Singapore, that output or that value add is considered part of GNI, but not part of GDP, okay? So if it is produced by a country's factors of production, so for example, an Indonesian company operating in Singapore would be, say, Wijaya Karya, building something in Singapore. The value add would be included in GNI Indonesia, but its value add will also be reported as GDP Singapore. Can you see the difference? An Indonesian company operating in Singapore will report GNI Indonesia, but GDP Singapore, because it is produced within the country of Singapore. So it is part of domestic product of Singapore, but it's also calculated as GNI Indonesia. So then the opposite will be if you have a Japanese company like Kajima operating in Jakarta, Kajima's value add will be calculated as GDP Indonesia and also GNI Japan. I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, please unmute yourself and ask questions, okay? Now, we are only looking at final goods and services. So if I were to give you an example, we go back to this concept of value add. So I need to just give you a very quick example of what we mean by avoiding double counting, okay? So we have to avoid double counting. So it is not total output, but value add. And that's how we avoid double counting. We use market values and some services like what a housewife does at home or a house husband does at home is not marketed. So you cannot actually value housework done at home. So that is then excluded, okay? So the value of a person, a family member working at home, cleaning the house, repairing the house, and all those things are not included in GNI or in GDP because that value cannot be calculated or it cannot be captured. There are some non-market items that are included. That is wages in kind, agricultural output in kind, imputed rent from owner-occupied housing. Now, do you guys understand this? Imputed rent from owner-occupied housing. That's quite an interesting one. What do you understand from that term? Anyone? What do you understand from that term? Imputed rent from owner-occupied housing. What do you understand from this term?
I don't understand.
Pak Bimo.
I don't understand.
Okay. You don't understand. Okay, let me give you an example. You buy a house in Indonesia and you rent the house out. You collect rent, correct?
Yeah.
So you actually receive
revenue,
revenue, which is then, that means your asset is creating value for you. Mm-hmm. So that means that your national income or your GDP actually increases by the amount of rent. Okay?
Okay.
Now, option 2, you buy the house, but you live in the house. Do you collect rent?
Of course not.
Of course not. Yes, but then if everybody buys a house and live in their own house, the value created by housing is not captured because you are theoretically renting it from yourself. Okay? You are renting the house from yourself. You pay rent from one pocket to another pocket, but both pockets belong to you. So this is how
the same asset.
It's the same asset.
Right?
Yes, because
the same asset. Yeah.
Yes, so that's why the asset must create a value. If you rent it out to somebody else, you collect rent. But if you live in it yourself, this is what is imputed rent. So this term imputed rent is calculated by the statistics department based on an estimate of what rent you will have to pay to live in your own house. Okay, because that goes into national income.
What value that we use to assess the value of renting my own house?
It is equivalent to how much you would rent it out if you don't live in the house. So same quality of house, how much would that rent be? So that is the value of imputed rent. So if you look at the Australian input-output tables or Australian GDP, we actually, or the statistics department actually calculate imputed rent and add that to GDP because that is real. Okay? It is not real rent, but it's imputed. So it's a number that the statistics department calculate based on the quality and value of your house. Any other questions on this? Because I think it's quite important you understand how value add is defined. Government spending is valued at cost, okay, because you can't, there's no market for government services. So for example, education in schools, your armed forces for defense, your police, medical care in public hospitals, and the cost of public administration. So all these are very difficult to value in terms of its real market value. So they value that at cost. So how much the government spends for teachers will become the value that is captured in input-output tables. All right. So now, to prevent double counting, let me just then show you an example of my Excel spreadsheet on how we avoid double counting. This is table 4.0. Okay, last week or the week before, we looked at value add for a contractor, right? So if we look at just this one, okay, we looked at this previously. So I gave you an example of a building. The contract sum is 100 million, materials 45 million, labor 40 million, utilities, preliminaries, value add. So the total adds up to 100 million. Main contractor output is 100 million. Value add is 46 million. So it's 40 over here, which is the labor cost plus profits, you get $46 million. Okay. Now, let's now look at subcontract. So let's assume that this project started off with $100 million contract sum. They subcontract 35 million to subcontractor B. Okay. Now, because they have subcontracted 35 million of the work to subcontractor B, the materials will be reduced, the labor costs will be reduced, utilities is reduced, preliminaries sometimes remain the same, profit is reduced, and the total contract sum is still 100 million, right? Because if you're the main contractor, you subcontract 35, you will still be reporting that you've done $100 million worth of work, but your value add has dropped. Your value add, direct value add, is now 32 plus 5. So your value add has dropped. So 32 plus 5 gives you 37. Now, out of the 35 million that was subcontracted, the subcontractor then has to spend money on materials, on labor, on utilities, on profit, and makes a profit of 1 million. So the total subcontract sum is 35. And out of the 35, value add is 9. Now, if you then ask your statistics department to speak to the two contractors, one main contractor A and one subcontractor B, and ask them about output, they will say that they have a contract of 100 million and 35 million. So the total contract sum is 135, which is not correct because the actual project cost is only 100 million. So the more accurate way of counting is to count value add, because this is the actual value add. Okay. So it's very important that we do not count total costs, right? But we only add up 37 plus 9 gives you 46. So that's how we prevent double counting. And the whole concept of input-output tables is this, that we do prevent double counting by tracking value add very vigorously. Any questions?
Pak Tiki.
Yes.
Okay, Pak Tiki.
Yes. One.
Yeah, I have a question about imputed rent, yeah, right? In previous you explained.
Yes.
Whether it applied only for houses or applied for every asset that we belong to the owner.
It for the economy, it should be all assets, but imputed rent only talks about houses and buildings.
How about the equipment that's
Equipment
How
is not counted. Yes. So that is not counted. So equipment that is used by, so you buy equipment, say you buy an excavator, but you use it yourself. No, there is no imputed rent for excavator. There is only imputed rent for housing.
Okay.
Okay.
House and another building, right?
Sorry?
How about another building, not only houses?
What? Give me an example. Shopping center.
Like shopping center or office building.
Yes, used by the owner. No, that one is fine because that one is an office building used by the owner is an asset. It's fine. It is captured.
Okay.
Because the owner pays for the building, it becomes an asset in the company accounts. And the company actually needs to have a return on investment, ROE, ROA, all those things will cover the cost of using an office. Okay. Whereas housing is not counted because as individuals, we do not file income tax for housing. Housing is not captured as in company accounts because this is our own home.
Okay. In some company, if the assets does not have the amount in a balance sheet, how to count it? The imputed rent. For example, I have asset 1,000 and in next 10 years, the asset have no amount in the balance sheet, and we still use the asset.
Correct. I understand what you mean. It is very common that they pay for assets using depreciation. So, for example, if you have excavator, your excavator will be depreciated over maybe 10 years, depending on your taxation rules. So, I can email you something separately. I think I need to move on, but this is a good question. I will write it down, and we will have a discussion about this later. Okay, Wawan?
Okay, Pak.
I have written it down. Okay, and then you have interest. Yes, we have covered all this, right? Gross national income. Now, GDP is pretty much the same thing. It's all the goods, all the value of final goods and services produced within a country's borders. So we will add up different approaches of calculating GDP, consumption, investment, government consumption. So if you look at this, it is, we've given you this formula before. It is private consumption, I for investment, G for government consumption, X for exports, M for imports. Okay, so that is using the expenditure approach. Now, if you go to the next slide, I will, now, if the tables are in English, it basically means that it is, I've obtained this from Australian Bureau of Statistics. So these are the key national account aggregates for Australia. It is a bit old. This is in 2017, 2018. So that's our GDP in million. So you always please check that the units are correct. It's in million. So our GDP in 2017, 2018 is 1.8 trillion Australian dollars, okay? And out of that, if we divide that by our population, we have our GDP per capita of about 75,000 Australian dollars per capita. Our GNI is slightly lower, okay? Our GNI is 1.6 1.791 trillion compared to GDP of $1.847 trillion. So sometimes I think it's not important at this stage to differentiate between the two. Just accept that there will be small differences, but I think it's fine. Now, what is more important here is that savings. Households need to save. So savings will then become the main source of funds to finance capital investment. All the documents I read about Indonesia is that you will realize that a lot of information coming out from Indonesia says that your government doesn't have enough funds to pay for infrastructure investment. Okay, so that is what the government collects from tax revenue. There is another source of funding for investment in infrastructure, which is from savings. So as long as you can convince Indonesians to save money and then use that savings to fund additional infrastructure investments, that may help your national economy to find the sources, to find the money to build Indonesia. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say here. Household savings is the main domestic source of funds to finance capital investments.
Where do you spend where do you save the money at?
You put the money in a bank, and then the bank will then
on behalf of individuals.
Yes, on behalf of the people. Yes, because if you don't save, where is the bank going to find money to invest?
Okay. Is that appropriated only for infrastructure or for any purposes?
For every investment, yeah, for every investment, because you need to have savings to be able to invest. Now, if you don't use your domestic source of savings, then you have to borrow in the international money market, which will then create future problems. Remember the Asian financial crisis and all those kind of problems. So a lot of the issue with investment has to do with savings. Okay, this is again revision. We've spoken about value add previously. So this is value add from Australia, and we divide our construction industry into 3 sectors: building, which includes residential building and non-residential building. We have infrastructure, which is the roads, bridges, port, airports, and all those things. And the third sector is construction services. So these are the building completion services, which includes electrician, plumber, carpenter, and all the other finishes that goes into building. So it's generally building and some, for the infrastructure, it could be land clearing, and I think it's generally land clearing. So that's the value add. So don't forget that this is value add, not total output, it's value add. And it's added up for every quarter, and you should get a value for a particular year, right? Okay, now let's look at input-output tables now. So the Australian, I will start with Australian input-output tables because that's what I'm most familiar with. I will then share with you your Indonesian input-output tables. Now, if you go to the Australian National Accounts, input-output tables are catalogued as 5209, and it's very easy for us to search for all that information because everything within the Australian Bureau of Statistics are catalogued under a 4-digit code. So as long as you remember 5209, that basically links to national accounts and input-output tables. If you look at GDP, you only have maybe about 10 or 15 industrial sectors. If you look at input-output tables, it will be disaggregated, right? So what we are talking about is disaggregation of the GDP accounts into a lot of different industrial sectors. So once you break it down, and I'll show you this input-output table afterwards. In Australia, we have 114 different sectors. And once you have details of 114 different industrial sectors, it allows you to carry out a lot of economic analysis on how one sector compares with another sector within your economy. It will then show you the linkages and dependencies that exist within an economy. So if you think about construction, as Pak Budi mentioned earlier, construction buys timber, construction buys steel. So those two materials come from the manufacturing industry. And we can then work out exactly how much timber and how much steel is bought from manufacturing, okay? And if you are interested in looking at imports, we can then examine the sector that imports the steel, because sometimes it is not the contractor that buys, it could be your manufacturer that buys some of these things. So that's to do with linkages and dependencies. You can then use that as a tool to forecast impact of a change in demand, such as increased spending in infrastructure, increased spending in buildings, increased spending in office buildings, shopping centers, or changes in employment. Say, for example, in the US, remember that the new President Biden is thinking about imposing a minimum wage. So you can then think about how a minimum wage will impact your national economy. You can look at how minimum wages impact construction industry. So basically, it gives you a lot of information, and it also gives you a very good way of calculating GDP. So it improves accuracy of national accounts. So what I'm going to do now is show you on my computer how we get on to get input-output tables from Australia. So this is my Chrome Australian Bureau of Statistics.gov.au. Okay. So this is our Australian Bureau of Statistics. It is very similar to your Badan Pusat Statistik in Indonesia. If you just click on the search button and you type in 5209, press enter, and it brings you to input-output tables. So this is super easy. Click on the first link and you should be able to get all the input-output tables for all the years that are available, okay? So there's a whole long story about what input-output tables are all about, some limitations, and if I click on this, we can see that all the input-output tables come in various tables, so they have additional tables, table 1, table 2, up to table 40, and you can download any of these tables as you wish. So what I'm going to show you is an example of what I've downloaded earlier. I'll show you table 1 and table 5, okay? Table 1. Okay, if the screen is too small, let me know. I will have to make it a bit bigger. Okay, so this is table 1 of the input-output tables. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see it. So on this side, these are products, okay? And on the rows, or sorry, on the columns, these are the industries. So it basically shows you what each industry produces. So for example, this industry, sheep, grain, beef, and dairy cattle produces sheep, grain, beef, and dairy cattle. They also produce agriculture, forestry, and fishing support services. They also produce some meat. So you can see that Industry 0101 produces a whole series of materials and goods. Now, this is quite interesting. Why does sheep, grain, beef, dairy, cattle also produce non-residential building construction? Any ideas? Farm structures. So if a farmer working in sheep and cattle builds their own farm structures, it will be captured here. That's quite interesting, isn't it? And the total output for sheep and cattle is 43 billion Australian dollars, I think. So you have to check what the units are. Can't find the units, okay? But I think it's in billion Australian dollars. So that's basically table 1. So it shows you what each industry produces. Now, if I were to then show you table 5. Okay, so this is now table 5. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so table 5 is now industry by industry. So we are not looking at what each industry produces, not looking at the products that they produce, but we're now looking at how the industries buy and sell to each other, okay? So now they are from industry. So these are the industries that supply, okay? And these are the industries that use. Can you see this? So the column B is the one supplying, and column C is the one that uses. So you can, let me just give you an example. Sugar, okay, let's look at sugar, all right? So sugar manufacturing supplies $9 million worth of products to sheep and cattle. Can you understand this? So this example basically shows you that in that particular year in Australia, the sugar manufacturing sector supplied $9 million of goods to sheep, grain, beef, and cattle. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you are interested in steel into construction, so let's look at steel. I'm going to highlight this entire row. Okay, so that's steel. I will have to view freeze pane. Am I frozen? Yes, I think I'm frozen. Now I'm going to look for construction. 3000, I think construction is, okay. So we look at 3001. This is residential construction. Okay. So that's residential construction. Iron and steel contributes $760 million worth of products to residential construction. So this table basically gives you full information of how goods and services flow in an entire country. Is there anything you guys want me to show you? Anything else you're interested in? Come on. So that's iron and steel. If you think about glass, so that's glass. And residential building buys $581 million worth of glass. from the glass manufacturing industry?
Ceramic,
Yes. Yes, what was your question? Cement. Okay, cement is quite high, 1,528 million. Structural steel, metal products. So immediately you can see exactly what the products are, what goes from the manufacturing industry into the residential housing sector. Now, what else? What else are you interested in? So there's a lot of interesting things that we can see from just looking at the input-output tables, okay? Now, if I zoom out, it is a very large table. So if I then try to see how large it is 114. Well, it's a square table, so it's 114 by 114. Okay. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and let's look at the supply and use tables. So what I've shown you over there is what we call supply and use tables. It is symmetrical. Okay. The supply and use tables are always symmetrical because you need to have in Australia, we use 114 industries. So it must be exactly the same for 114 industries that supply compared to 114 industries that use. So it's always square. Previously, some of the supply use tables were rectangular, having more products than industry, but nowadays it's always square. So I've shown you the basic structure of an industry by industry table, which is shown in table 5, which is what I've shown you very quickly. Flows between domestic industries are shown in quadrant 1. Okay, so let me explain what quadrant 1, quadrant 2, and quadrant 3 means. Okay, so let me share that again. Input output tables, share. Now, let me zoom in again. All right, so this is what we call quadrant 1 is a, wait. Let me just close this. Let's look at something else. It's a lot easier if I share a smaller one. So I'm going to share the one that you have, the one that I've sent to you, which is the Indonesia one. So if you look at your Indonesia one, it has been simplified to 17 sectors. Okay, so this is the Indonesian input-output table that was from 2010. And it's in Bahasa Indonesia, so I hope all of you can read that. There are 17 sectors over here. It starts from pertanian, pertambangan, industri pengolahan, all the way to jasa pendidikan, jasa kesehatan, and jasa lainnya. So what you see over here in the 17 by 17, okay, is quadrant 1. We call that quadrant 1 because it shows you the flow from these 17 sectors to the 17 sectors up here. Okay, so it shows you the flow of goods and services from the 17 on the left to the 17 on the right. That is quadrant 1. So that box is called quadrant 1. That is industry to industry flow. Quadrant 2 is when we move slightly to the right. Okay, so I've moved my Excel spreadsheet a bit to the right. these are still the 17 industries. Okay, so this has not changed. This is still 17. This is total permintaan antara. So that's what we call total intermediate demand. It is the total of quadrant 1, what was supplied to other industries. This is total final demand, total permintaan akhir, which means total final demand. So that is what is actually delivered. So that will reflect the total project cost, right? That is final demand. And if you look at construction, your construction sector, which is shown here in green, is 0 here, 0 here, 0 here, but very high over here. Can you see that? So that is household consumption, konsumsi rumah tangga. That is konsumsi lembaga non-profit, so non-profit organizations, konsumsi pemerintah, and this is the most important one that I want you to understand. Pembentukan modal tetap bruto. So this in English is called gross fixed capital formation. And this becomes the assets of the buyer. All right, so these are what you call assets. And this is the most important bit in the sense that construction, most of the output of construction goes to investment. It becomes your national asset. Just like Pak Bimo was saying, if you invest in building a house, your house becomes of value. It is considered capital formation. The value of the house is never destroyed. It remains of value. So this is where if you build a house, it contributes to this. If you build a highway, it contributes to this. If you build a hotel, if you build a hospital, all that becomes assets. And it becomes pembentukan modal tetap. All right. So if you look at the total permintaan akhir or your total demand, look, it's 1729 and 1578 goes to final demand. So it is actually a very large proportion of the output of construction goes towards investment. And this is why we say that it is very important for us to examine the construction industry, because we contribute the largest amount to gross fixed capital formation. So if you look at, okay, so now you look at this one, which sector contributes the most? Which of your 17 sectors contribute the most to pembentukan modal tetap? Construction, right?
Yeah, construction.
Construction, yes, yes. We are in this fantastic industry that contributes to national wealth. You look at manufacturing. Manufacturing is very small compared to construction. So this is why we are interested in the construction industry, which is very, very critical. We produce things that will remain durable. It is an investment and it remains in our national accounts. Okay, so the wealth of a country.
Yeah,
so
because for example, like for manufacturing, it's the spending is for operating expense only, not
yes,
not contribute to creating fixed asset.
Yes, they don't create as
well
much
as other
asset
industry
compared to
so you're correct.
Construction.
Yeah.
Okay. Industry pengolahan is only very small, 280 whatever units. I think it's trillion over here. Okay, so it's small compared to construction. Can you all see this? So if you, it's like if the manufacturing industry produces a pencil, the pencil will be consumed. Okay, so let's look at this example. Industry pengolahan, right? Say let's assume that they produce one pencil. where do you think the pencil goes? In the consumption. It goes into konsumsi rumah tangga, okay? If I were to buy a pencil, the cost of the pencil appears here. Next year, the value of the pencil is gone because you have used the pencil. If you talk about an investment in construction, if you build a house, the value of the house goes here. Okay, and you are actually creating value and it remains of value. It is not consumed, it is invested, and the house will continue to give you rent. So this is why we keep saying that the construction industry is a very important sector of the economy, mainly because of how we treat them in national accounts. We are creating wealth for the country, and it is clearly the number one producer of investments and wealth for a country compared to any other sector. We beat manufacturing by a large amount. Okay, so that is this whole section is Quadrant 2. Okay, where the output goes in final demand is shown in Quadrant 2. So you have to remember that it's Quadrant 2. Okay, let me then move on to Quadrant 3. I'm going to zoom this back. Come back here. Now, where is Quadrant 1? Annotate. Okay, this one is Quadrant 1, right? Quadrant 1 is what we consider flow between industry to other industry. So the total flow from construction or from other sectors, sorry, I accidentally covered it up. This is Quadrant 1. Now, if you were to look at industri pengolahan to konstruksi, that is the very high value, right? 734. So that is what the construction industry buys from manufacturing. 734 trillion, I think, the units. And if we total up all this, the total of that appears out here. So that is total konsumsi antara, or in English, total intermediate demand. So that amount of money is what we buy from other sectors. So that's in Quadrant 1. Quadrant 3 are the primary inputs. So this is what we call Q3. Q3 are primary inputs, and that would be compensation for workers, profits for companies, and taxes collected by the government. All right, so that's Quadrant 3. We call that primary inputs because that's that cannot be created by other industrial sectors. That is your sweat because you have to work. That is the profits for the company because the companies have to invest to make those profits, and government collects taxes. That again is value add. So those are what we call Quadrant 3. Are there any questions at this point? I'm showing you a lot of numbers. I hope you don't need new spectacles after this.
Mr. Teke,
Abdul is already shaking his head. He may need new glasses after this.
I want to ask Mr. Teke.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you explain me what is the meaning of from product construction to industry construction? That the center value.
This one, 8574.
Yes.
Very good question. What do you think is happening here?
Is there meaning from the subcontractor to the contractor, or?
Yes, correct. Very good. It is the flow from construction to construction. So it must be from subcontractor to main contractor. Okay.
Is there any case that from the subcontractor to another industry, not
Yes.
for construction. Is there any
Yes,
for that?
yes. Okay, so you look at konstruksi to this one, pengadaan listrik and gas. So that is konstruksi to gas. What do you think?
Yes, it can be the maybe like the listrik subcontractor listrik, but I think this is pengadaan. But we talked earlier that pengadaan is material, not a value added, not a
Yes.
jasa. What do you
So
think about that?
this is the work done by subcontractor that is not contributing to investment. So what can you think? This is work done by a subcontractor for pengadaan listrik. What example can you give? Are they building power stations?
Yes, maybe.
No, cannot be power station, because power station is an investment. They
Oh,
cannot be building power station.
not will be the asset.
Cannot be asset. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
cannot be asset, because asset will be at the quadrant 2, correct?
Okay, thank you.
So let's think about this. It is a very good question, but let me put it to you this way. If you think of the power station is made out of concrete, and the concrete is now in need of repair, so you call a subcontractor to repair the concrete of a power station. It will be captured here. Okay? So that is the input of a subcontractor repairing concrete for the power station. Can you see that? Then you have industry pengolahan. So this is again, what can the subcontractor do for manufacturing that is not creating a new building? So they must be repairing or doing something that is not new, because anything that is new becomes an asset. Okay, very good. You now understand a lot of all these things. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Where's my PowerPoint? Okay. So I've shown you table 1, I've shown you table 5, I've shown you your Indonesian table, but let's ignore imports for now, right? I say that this has a direct allocation of imports, but let's leave imports until later. So what I've done is I've shown you quadrant 1, I've shown you quadrant 2, I've also shown you quadrant 3. So quadrant 3 is kompensasi tenaga kerja, surplus usaha bruto, and pajak dikurang subsidi. All right, so that's the input-output tables for now. Next one. Okay, so I've shown you this. This is basically telling you where the quadrants are. Now, table 8 has an indirect allocation of imports. Let's ignore that for now. Okay, but let's examine some of the important structures of input-output tables. So the total supply from each industry, ignore the first line. Let's look at the second line. Second line basically tells you that the amount of inputs into one industry supplied by each of the other industries reflect technological relationships. So by looking at how the construction industry brings in products from other sectors, so the construction industry will bring in a small quantity from pertanian or agriculture. it will bring in a large quantity from manufacturing. It will bring in a small quantity from electricity and gas. It will bring in some from services, business services, what you call jasa perusahaan, okay? Very small from jasa pendidikan, and so on. So all these numbers describe technological relationship. It is not technology as us civil engineers understand. This is technology from an economics perspective. And that's very important because we can examine the technological relationship and see how Indonesia compares to other countries. And this is what the economists call technology, all right? Where you get your inputs from is actually very important because it helps us understand how the construction industry operates and how you can then improve your construction industry. Some assumptions. Okay, so let me now move to assumptions because you need to understand these assumptions very well to understand how to use input-output tables. We assume that, say for example, construction, we assume that one sector produces a single output. So to be more accurate, you cannot use the 17 sectors that I've shown you. You need to look for something like 150 sectors to give you more accurate information. But within that one sector, out of 150, you are still assuming that it only produces a single output. All right, so that is a very strong simplifying assumption. Each sector has a single input structure. We basically say that the technological relationships are the same whether you are building a timber house or a brick house or a steel structure for residential housing. So that is a very limiting assumption when we look at input-output tables. It doesn't give you that much information. There is no substitution between products of different sectors. Sometimes, see, when the example I gave you, you can build a house out of timber or you can build a house out of brick. But timber and brick come from two different sectors. We do not capture the substitution of timber for brick or brick for timber. So that is the problem with input-output tables, all right? It doesn't give you all the information that you think you may need. So as long as you understand the assumptions, that works pretty well. There is another table called the imports table. So it's very similar to what I've shown you here. In Australia, it will be 114. It will show you exactly which product is imported. Let me just open it up for you. Imports is, I think, supply use imports is 03. So those of you who have if you wish to download that from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, you should be able to get that. Okay, so this is table 3. It shows you, this is the Australian one. Okay, so it shows you imports into, these are the sectors that supply, and these are the sectors that use. Import. So let's look at how much we import into construction. Residential building. So I'm going to highlight this whole thing in yellow. Okay, so what do we import? The largest number is 566. Okay, so in Australia, we import a lot of petroleum and coal product manufacturing into residential construction. We also import lots of polymers. We import fabricated metal products. So these 3 are quite high. We also, no, that's not the one. Electrical equipment. We import a lot, electrical equipment. So you can see very clearly what we import straight away by looking at input-output tables. Okay, so when you find your Indonesian input-output tables, you should be able to see the same things. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to let you do some work. And now how am I going to do this? I'm going to share a screen, okay? So I'm going to share the entire screen. Minimize this. Input-output tables, Australia. This one. Okay, so on the next slide, I'm going to get you to open up. So those of you who have your computer in front of you, can you open up? I'm not sure how you're going to do this, whether you have enough computer screens. I have 2 screens over here. Can you open up the input-output table that I have sent you on chat and help us look at all these questions? What do you want me to show? Do you want me to keep those questions on the screen and we look at the Excel together, or how would you suggest doing this? Can you still see the questions? If I do 2 screens like that, can you read that on your computer?
Yes, Miss.
Okay, very good. You can still see. All right, so let's answer these. A bit small?
Yeah, hardly.
Hardly see. How do I make it bigger? Because
well, I have a pair of old eyes here.
Old eyes, yeah. We are all old. The young people can see. Okay. Let's read out the question 1.
Okay,
what is the value?
Okay, that will be fine.
What is the value for total construction output? Okay, value of total construction output for year 2010. All right, so this is the Indonesia one. What is the value of total construction output? Where do you find this information? Please note that in my Excel, I am using the British system for thousands and decimal, okay? Not your Indonesian system. So my 1000 is 1,000. This is equal to 1,000, okay? Whereas for you is 1.000 is Indonesia. So I'm using the British system. Okay, so what is the total construction output for the year? Where can we find this information? Question 1. Have you found it? What color do you want this to be? Blue, or let's make it blue. Okay, so this is the answer to question 1. 1,724,302,569. That is what we call total input domestic atas harga dasar. That is the total output for construction, because if you then scroll to the end, 1,724 is also the same over here. Okay, so if you go to the cell AN11, that is also 1,724, because input must be equal to output. Okay, do you get this? Total output domestic atas harga dasar, so it's also 1,724. It is exactly the same as this 1,724 over here. What is the currency unit? 1,724. I think this is 1,724 trillion, right? So just check the units. I think the unit shown in the Excel is million. So 1724302,569. So this will be 1724302,569 million, I think. Okay, question 2. What is the total construction value added? Total construction value added is which one? Question 1 is this answer. Question 2 is
593.
593. Yes,
That one.
593, which is equal to 351 plus kompensasi tenaga kerja 237 plus 5. Okay, so it is this 3. You add those 3, 237, which is kompensasi tenaga kerja, 351 surplus usaha bruto, and then 4.9, which is pajak dikurang subsidi. So that gives you 593. All right, so that's total construction value add. What is GDP for Indonesia? This is a good question. How can you find GDP for Indonesia? If you can find value add for construction, where do you think is GDP for Indonesia? This is 593 is value add for construction. So if you sum all the value add for all the sectors in Indonesia, it will be over here. Okay, so this is the answer to question 3. Because that is nilai tambah bruto of all. If you don't believe me, you can do sum of 17. Okay, this is the sum of all the nilai tambah bruto. So that is your GDP Indonesia. That is your question 3, GDP for Indonesia 2010. Can you see how GDP is calculated now? It is just the total of all the value add. Okay, what is the construction contribution to GDP in percentage? Question 4, what is the construction contribution to GDP? So what you do is this, question 4, construction percentage is basically nilai tambah is this one divided by this one, and you put a percentage. Okay, so that's your construction GDP percentage. 8.88% in year 2010. Are you guys still following me? Am I going too fast, too slow? Come on, tell me. Or just nice?
No, sir.
Nice.
It's fine?
It's
Good.
very fine.
Okay. Sorry. What is the total value of, what is the value of total intermediate inputs into construction? Total intermediate inputs. So what does the construction industry buy from other sectors? So that's question 5. What do we buy from other sectors? Construction industry, what do we buy from other sectors? This one, total
11
konsumsi
minus.
barang. No, this one. 1118.
118 minus 85.
But Bimo, what did you say? Minus?
Minus 85 from the construction itself. Sector 006.
Ah, yes, minus 8574. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. No, but that's total intermediate input. So we also count subcontractors. So that's fine. So it is 1118. So it's just this value because that is total konsumsi antara. Okay, question 6. Sorry. Question 6. Which industries supplies the most inputs into construction? Question 6. Most inputs. Which one? Quite obvious, right? Industri pengolahan. So the largest one is this. Industri pengolahan at 734. Okay. So question 6, the largest contributor is manufacturing at 734. Question 7, how does construction contribute to construction in cell? This one we've already covered. How does construction contribute to construction itself? So we're talking about this one, 8574.
Yeah.
So 8574 is usually subcontracting. Okay, 8574 is subcontracting. Okay, so now this is where you guys need to do some processing. Which industry exhibits the highest value add in Indonesia? Which industry contributes the highest value add?
Pengolahan.
Pengolahan. Where is pengolahan? So we are now looking at this one, this row. Yes, it's pengolahan, right? 1552. So this is the largest. So if you want to rank them, you can use the Excel rank function. You can rank number 1. What is number 2? 9, 7. You got to go out and check.
Pertanian.
Agriculture, rank 2. Okay. And then followed by perdagangan, right? Rank 3. Okay, so you know what to do with this. You can just use an Excel function and do rank. Why? Is this the correct way of looking at it? Or is there another method of looking at this? Because what you can do is, what you're looking at is the absolute number. What we can do is calculate value add as a percentage of output. So we can actually do this equal to, equal to nilai tambah bruto divided by total input. So that is, agriculture is that value. And then I go up to 17. Okay, so agriculture is 0.824. What is this? Water, pengadaan air pengelolaan sampah, that is 0.826. 0.67 is perdagangan. Manufacturing is only 0.355. You see? So there are two ways of looking at which one is ranked number 1. Which one is more important? Is it the absolute value or the percentage? What do you think? why is value add for agriculture so high?
Because mostly doing by human.
Yes, it's mostly the input is soil, which is given by God. Input is rain, again given by God, free, and then human labor, right? That is why your kompensasi tenaga kerja is high and your surplus usaha bruto is high. Your intermediate inputs are very small. Okay? Your intermediate inputs are very small because most of the inputs to agriculture is soil and rain. Okay? So that gives you a very high value. But if you then compare with manufacturing, your manufacturing value is big 1552. Okay, your VA on its own is 1552 trillion, but your percentage is small. So which one is more important for your country? You guys have to think about this. Okay, you think about this. Which one is more important? Is it important to have a high value add percentage, or is it more important to have a high value add number? Any suggestions?
Depend. I think depends.
Yeah, it depends on what the government is trying to do. Okay, it all depends on what the objective you are trying to achieve with this analysis. So I'm just telling you how the input-output tables work. You have to decide what you want to do with this tool. Which industry exhibits the lowest value add? Okay, let's look at lowest value add. In terms of, let's look at in terms of percentage. Okay, so what is the lowest value add in terms of percentage?
Mining.
Mining.
My guess is mining now.
No, mining is very good. Mining and agriculture is very good. Because, you know why? Because everything is given by God.
Because Indonesia is Indonesia is religious country.
So it's very good, right? All the primary sectors, everything that you get from natural resources has very high value add, because you see there is no kompensasi for God.
Yeah, but with regard to sustainability, all the natural resources will be soon depleted, except
Correct.
perhaps agriculture. But mining,
Correct.
it's different story.
Yes, it's a limited supply, but so that is another limitation of input-output. We have not considered environmental costs. Okay, we just take, but we never count the cost. So that is something that is clearly missing from input-output tables. But these are all economic discussions. Okay, the economists have not gone so advanced as to calculate economic environmental cost. But so let's look at this. So the lowest value add in terms of percentage is in energy or utilities, electric and gas. Okay, because that requires very little labor. Okay, that is a high value product, but very small labor component. So that's only 0.234. What else? Real estate, jasa. Now all the jasa is very high because you have to pay a lot of workers. Say for example, administrasi pemerintah. So government administration, obviously there is very little physical hardware input. It is always a large proportion of kompensasi tenaga kerja, right? So labor cost is very high. Pendidikan, education again is very high. Okay, so all those which are labor intensive tends to be very high, which also correlates to your agriculture, 0.824. So agriculture actually gives you the highest value add, but we'll talk about agriculture later on. Okay, next one. Which industry exhibits the largest total intermediate demand? Question 10. Largest total intermediate demand. So what I'm going to do now is, let me delete a few of these answers, okay? Total intermediate demand as a percentage, okay? So what I'm going to do is total intermediate demand or total konsumsi antara, TKA, right? In Bahasa Indonesia equals to this divided by this 0.19, copy, take it across to all 17. Okay, so agriculture only buys 19% from other sectors. Mining buys 26%. Manufacturing is very good, you see? So this is good because they buy 63.5% of inputs from other sectors. Listrik is also good. This is high. That's low. Construction is high. And the rest are very low. Okay. So what can we say about these values? Manufacturing, electricity and gas, and construction. So these are the sectors that will need to purchase a lot of intermediate products from other sectors of the industry. Okay, so most of what construction needs is produced in other sectors, and that is one of the main reasons we keep talking about construction is all the investments in construction will stimulate the economy, because over here, if you look at this basically means that every, I'm going to use rupiah for you, right? Every 100 rupiah spent in construction will generate rupiah 64.9 in manufacturing. We will buy 64.9 from manufacturing. Okay, so every 100 rupiah of final demand in construction will generate not in manufacturing, 64.9 in other sectors. Does that make sense? So that is, again, explains why construction and manufacturing are actually two of the very important sectors of most national economies. List the industries with the largest value add to the... But Bimo, was there a question from you?
Oh, yeah. I have trouble hearing you. I mean, your sound is losing.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is the connection?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good. I'm just worried that my internet connection. So list the industries from the largest value add to the least. I think you can do this yourself. So what is the, what is the impact of an additional 1 trillion expenditure in construction in 2010? I've already given you a demonstration over here. So 100 rupiah additional expenditure in construction will generate 64.9 in other sectors of the Indonesian economy. All right. Now, we can also, so we call that a backward linkage. All right. So this total intermediate demand or total konsumsi antara basically looks at how much an investment or change in demand in these 17 sectors drive your overall Indonesian economy. So if you spend 100 rupiah in agriculture, say you spend 100 rupiah in agriculture, other sectors of the economy only increase by 19.2 rupiah. So that is a very small value. But if you spend 100 rupiah in manufacturing, other sectors will increase by 63.5. Okay, so those are the sectors that we think are important to your country. And that's because they have a very large backward indicator.
Means currently the strategic investment perhaps into the energy sector, right?
Yes. Yeah, you are also investing into the energy sector, which again makes sense.
For 100,
you get 76.5.
76.5, yeah.
Okay, so once you understand input-output tables, you begin to see that what the government of Indonesia is doing today makes sense, because there are a whole bunch of economists advising them. So your Bank Indonesia will have economists advising them on what to invest to get the largest inputs or improvements in your national economy. All right, from an economics perspective. Okay, this is not from a social perspective. Socially, you may do other things, but from an economics perspective, this is what the government is trying to do. And understanding input-output tables gives you a very clear view of what works and what does not work. Okay, that's quadrant 1. Let us now look at quadrant 2. Okay, so quadrant 2 is on the final demand side. Question 1, what is the total value for total intermediate consumption for construction? Okay, question 1, total intermediate consumption for construction. So this is what the construction industry produces that goes as inputs into other sector. So we now move into this green line here. This is construction, producing, and selling to other sectors. So the total is over here. Total permintaan antara. Okay. So row W, this is 151. So the answer is this. Question 1 for total intermediate demand, construction is equal to 151, which is up here, which is this value here. So construction total output was 17, what was the value now? I've forgotten. 1724, right? Let's write this down. 1724 is total output. Out of 1724, 151 is intermediate demand. 151 goes to intermediate demand. So we are building for other sectors of the Indonesian economy. So we are, okay, so let's look at this. 4271. So 4 trillion goes into jasa pendidikan. So that is the input from construction into jasa pendidikan, which is schools. What can the construction industry do for schools?
Building school?
No, cannot be building schools, because building the school will go into this one. pembentukan modal tetap. So this is possibly the repair of schools. Right? This is, you see, what happens is this. Let me just show you how it works. Annotate. So this is construction. This is the amount that construction contributes to pendidikan. And from this is the total of pendidikan. And the total output of pendidikan is this. So construction contributes 4 into a total konsumsi antara 108. You add the salaries of the teachers, you add some profits of the schools, this could be private schools, okay? And then the tax, and this is the total output of jasa pendidikan. And the input from construction into jasa pendidikan is only very small. It's only 4 out of 311. So that is what, 1%? Okay. So the input of construction into jasa pendidikan is very, very small. So this is what we talk about. This is what we call a forward linkage. What construction contributes as inputs to other sectors. But we contribute only a very small amount because most of our contributions are into assets. So in many other countries where the statistics department is very clear about what they're doing here, this is always considered as repair and maintenance. All right. In Europe, in the UK, repair and maintenance is a very large proportion of the construction industry output. R&M can be as large as gross fixed capital formation. Can you see that in Indonesia, your pembentukan modal tetap is 10 times larger than your total permintaan antara. So your repair portion is very small, repair and maintenance is very small, your new building is very large. That is because Indonesia is a developing country. Now, you compare Indonesia with the UK. UK is a very old country with a lot of old buildings. So they will have this value very high and this value much lower because they have to spend a lot of money maintaining their structures. So in the UK, if your school has a leaking roof, you call a construction company to repair the roof, it goes in here, okay? It is added up here. Whereas in Indonesia, you tend to build a lot more new schools than repairing old schools. So your value here is very high. So can you see how Quadrant 2 is different from Quadrant 1? Are there...
Can I ask you something?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. How can we assure ourselves that the interpretation of input-output analysis is what
is correct,
where actually BPS did the survey? For example, like interpretation that construction contribute about what? 151?
Yes,
for
151 trillion. Yep.
No, for education. Especially.
Jasa pendidikan, this one.
Yeah, that we assume it's a spending for maintenance and repair, not for other purposes. Because it's very difficult to, because it's very difficult. If we trace or we collect data based on the contract value, it's very difficult to distinguish whether it's new construction or repair, because the value of construction is just the same.
I fully agree with you. So it all goes back to this. It goes back to my example over here, whether the companies report output or report value add. You see, they have to report value add, this one, not output, because if you calculate output, then it's wrong. Especially with subcontract, right? Yeah. Contractor A will say my contract is 100 million. Subcontractor B will say its contract is 35 million. If you add the two together, you get 135, which is wrong, because the contract is total contract is only 100 million. But if you do value add, then this is 37, this is 9, and this is 46, which is correct.
Out of 100.
Correct. So the value add is always correct because there is no double counting. So it is up to BPS, your Badan Pusat Statistik, to do this correctly. So that's where Wawan comes in. I hope Wawan understands all this and then can check with BPS to see how they produce the input-output tables. Because if your data collection is wrong, then your input-output tables are wrong.
That's what we've been trying to know for years.
Up
to today, still got no answer from BPS.
Okay.
The only formal answer is what's written on the report.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, but when I look at the numbers, it does not look wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
So it still makes sense. If it still makes sense, then I think it's fine. If it is seriously wrong, I will be asking you a lot of questions. So it still makes sense. I'm not saying that BPS is 100% correct, but you need to have input-output tables because it is, you have to balance. It's almost like accounting, that all your input must be equal to output. Because if your input is not equal to output, if it's wrong for construction, it will be wrong for many other sectors. So this takes a long time to calculate. In Australia, it takes us about 3 years to calculate. Your students from last year were saying that they couldn't find anything later than 2010. So that means that it has taken your Indonesian government many years before they will produce an input-output table.
Yeah.
So we hope that Pak Wawan and some of the other students can help us understand some of the data collection methodology by BPS. So this is what we call total permintaan antara. So that's what the total intermediate demand is from a total intermediate consumption. So it's consumption over here, right? So these are what we call consumption by other sectors of the industry. This is what's consumed by rumah tangga or households. So it's quite funny that it's zero over here. So this is exactly what Pak Bimo is saying. Obviously, your house needs repair, but it is not captured. Konsumsi rumah tangga. So contractor doing repairs for your house is not captured in your BPS. Konsumsi lembaga, non-profit, again, zero. Konsumsi pemerintah, government consumption is again zero. So that is possibly a statistical error that they have not managed to produce those numbers. If we continue on, so that's gross fixed capital formation, that's quite large. Okay, so I've already explained two, which is how intermediate consumption for construction is used. So I've already explained how this one, 4271, is inputs from construction into jasa pendidikan. Question 3, V11, W11, and X11 is 0. These are these three cells. They are 0 because BPS has not produced those figures. What is the value of construction contribution to gross fixed capital formation? That's this value over here, 1553. Okay, 1553. So that is a very high percentage of the output of construction goes towards modal tetap, which is gross fixed capital formation. What is the percentage of construction output that goes to Gfcf? Now, if you want to calculate percentage, we have to go over here and do percentage GF, gross fixed capital formation, and then do this for all the other sectors. This one divided by total output domestic. Okay, this one. Oops.
Very small.
Very small. Pertanian. Pertanian is always very small. Don't worry about pertanian. Pertanian is not good. So
everything else is also small.
Everything else is small except construction, 90%.
Yeah.
Manufacturing is 6%. And real estate is quite, no, jasa perusahaan, business services is 14%. Do you know why business services is high? Jasa perusahaan. What are they producing that becomes asset?
Jasa
perusahaan, this one.
Buildings, perhaps?
No, jasa perusahaan is cannot produce buildings. Business services.
Yeah. Contribute to
assets. So what assets do you think they can produce?
Intellectual property?
Intellectual property, yes, correct. Intellectual property. So jasa perusahaan also create assets, but mainly in intellectual property. Manufacturing will also create some intellectual property, but most of their assets are in machinery and equipment. So all the machinery in a factory will be in manufacturing. So these are the three main assets that a country has. Buildings, machinery, and intellectual property. Okay, now you begin to also appreciate that there is one large asset that is missing, human resource. So what you have in your brain, that is the output of jasa pendidikan, is not captured over here.
Human resource is not asset. Not in balance sheet.
It doesn't come into the balance sheet, yes, unfortunately, but I think socially we understand that.
Yeah, it is considered an intangible asset.
Intangible, yes,
Yeah.
But it's very important. Okay, but it doesn't appear down here. So this is another limitation of input-output tables. Okay, what other industrial sectors contribute to Gfcf? So we've already discussed that. Okay, we've already discussed that. It's manufacturing. It's manufacturing, and so this is industri pengolahan, this is construction, and that is business services. What industry supplies the most exports? Okay, so let's quickly look at exports. Which industry supplies most exports? Total import,
Mining.
export.
Mining.
Export barang. Okay, there are two. Export barang and export jasa. Export barang is mining.
Mining.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And then
process
manufacturing. Yes. Okay, so those are the two largest ones. Construction doesn't export barang because obviously your barang cannot be exported. But you can export jasa. So there is some small export of construction services, but you cannot export products. Your mining and then Your largest one is still manufacturing. 907 is manufacturing. Export barang. And then your mining.
Trade.
Third one is
trade.
Trade, wholesale and retail trade. Yes, that's good. So that sort of gives you a very clear description of your entire industry. All right. So in summary, let me just try to go back to my PowerPoint slides. I can enlarge this. So input-output tables, after having gone through this very simple exercise with me, we can say that input-output tables can serve many analytical purposes. It estimates the level of output of production sectors required by a given final demand. So we can very easily, like I've shown you, 100 rupiah of additional final demand. You can work out how much we need to buy from manufacturing, how much we need to buy from other sectors of your Indonesian industry. Now, it's not very useful if we were to look at it from a rupiah value. So it is easier if we convert all that to direct requirements coefficient. We change all those numbers to ratio, all right? So you calculate input as a percentage of output. So this is what we're trying to do here, to calculate input as a percentage of output and use these percentages for estimating the input requirements for any given output of that industry. So let's try doing that. Let me zoom out a little bit. Go back in, sorry. Okay, so let's look at construction. 228, 69, 734. Now, all those values are very difficult to understand. So I'm going to try to convert this to a percentage or a ratio. So I am taking this, I call the new matrix a 17 by 17 matrix. And I take, let me just delete this so that you can see how it's done. I delete all that, I'm sorry. Let me just delete all that and I show you again. All right, so I'm trying to take this value and report this as a ratio to the total output. Okay. And I press F4 once, twice. I press F4 2 times so that it remains at row 31. I then copy that and put it down here. Delete that, delete that. Okay, so basically, this value is 1, okay? 1.0. So that makes it a lot easier now for us to examine the input coefficients. So we buy 1.6% from pertanian, we buy 4% from mining, we buy 42% from manufacturing, we buy 3% from transportation. Can you see how that works? So this table now of 17 by 17 is now called the A matrix. These are direct coefficients. We call them direct coefficients. Because we have converted all the values to 1 down here. All right. So that is very useful because if you then try to look at nilai tambah bruto or value add, it is very clear. value add is 82%, 73%, 34%. So all those values are now as presented as direct coefficients. Does that make sense? All right. So that is what we call the A matrix. It gives you all the values as coefficients. So in the flow tables characterized by a direct allocation, let's leave imports to a later date. Okay, so once we've converted all that to direct input coefficients, we can then look at direct backward linkage indicators. So these are what we call increase in output for an increase in demand, right? So direct backward linkage indicator, this is an example I'll show you. What is the increase in output in manufacturing if there is a 100 rupiah extra demand in construction? What is the increase in output in manufacturing? So if we look at manufacturing, so this is 1, and manufacturing is, let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see. Manufacturing is this one, right? So a 100 rupiah increase in construction demand will increase manufacturing demand by 42.6 rupiah. Okay, does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say is this: rupiah 100 increase in construction demand will lead to rupiah 42.6 demand in manufacturing. Okay, so that's what those direct coefficients tell you. Now there is this total direct backward linkage indicator. Is this? What is the total increase in Indonesian output if there is a 100 rupiah extra demand in construction? So you then just look for this number over here, total konsumsi antara. So that basically tells you that if you have a 100 rupiah increase in construction demand, you have 64.9 rupiah increase demand in entire Indonesia economy. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do with the input-output tables. 100 rupiah increase in construction increases demand by 42.6 in manufacturing, but it also increases all the other sectors by a small amount. And if you add that up, it is 64.87 rupiah, or 64.9. Now, if you look at this, this is quite high compared to all the other sectors. The only sector that is higher is pengadaan listrik and gas. If you wish, you can compare your Indonesian input-output tables across different countries. If you wish, I have input-output tables of many countries around the world. So yeah, as an exercise, if you wish to examine them, we can have a conversation about how Indonesia is different or similar to other countries around the world. If you look at the Australian one, our construction is not that large. I think our construction is about 7.7% over here. Okay, our construction is 7.7. Our manufacturing is only 9.4. So our manufacturing has actually come down significantly, and this is even much older data, our manufacturing has come down significantly, and we don't manufacture so much anymore. Okay, so some final thoughts about the construction industry. So what we do is we call these input coefficients the technology. So let me just highlight this. This is what we call technology from an economics perspective. All right. Every construction sector around the world will have a unique technological input, and that is clearly divided into what they buy from manufacturing, what they buy from business services, what they buy from mining, what they buy from agriculture. So a lot of all these figures, you can compare this across different countries and make your own conclusions on how construction industries are different across the world. IO tables encompasses everything that the construction industry needs. So it is very, very comprehensive. It has everything to produce buildings and other infrastructure. You will see that it is an assembly activity. We do not produce things ourselves. We buy products from other sectors. We buy sand, stone, timber, steel, cement, and many other building materials from the manufacturers, and we assemble them into a building, or we assemble them into infrastructure projects. Now, this is a point that I've mentioned earlier. Because the industry is defined as work carried out on a construction site, as the industry mechanizes, we keep talking about using precast concrete, using prefabricated building components. Many of these components will be prefabricated in a manufacturing plant, and that moves it even further into the manufacturing sector. So we will increase this number over here. All right, this number over here will continue to go up if we shift more construction activities into manufacturing sector. And final point over here is that nearly all the output goes into gross fixed capital formation, which is what you call what is it called? It's
modal dasar.
Modal. So it becomes pembentukan modal tetap. Okay, modal tetap. So it becomes investment. Is there a trend? So what I've done is when I started this research many years ago, I was thinking that is it important to have a high value add? So this is a figure of value add versus construction as a percentage of GDP. And I think is there a trend? And whether it's important to have a high value add? What do you guys think? Indonesia is out here. This is much older data. I think this is 2008 data. Indonesia is here. Australia is here. Japan is here. Switzerland is here. USA, Germany, UK, China. So what do you think? Okay, first question. Why is Japan having such a high percentage of GDP? Whereas some of the other countries, like Taiwan, has a small construction percentage of GDP. It's quite commonly known that Japan invests in a lot of infrastructure because it is a very small country and it is a very rugged country. So they have the same problems as you have. They've got earthquakes, they've got tsunamis, which you have as well. So they tend to spend a lot more on infrastructure. Okay.
TK,
China, yes.
Can I interrupt? Would that be also possible those DGP also made up from the export of construction? For example, like Japan?
No, because Japan GDP, so if it's Kajima operating in Indonesia, it doesn't count as Japanese
export.
GDP. No, it doesn't count as export because it's not captured, it's not produced in Japan. Unless you are buying steel from Japan, then it is manufacturing export, but it's not construction export.
So how can we have the export side on the input-output table?
Later. I will come to that in the next couple of slides, imports and exports, because that is actually a very complex issue to look at imports and export. So I think the conclusion over here is it does not matter whether you have a high value here or a high value here, right? It doesn't make much sense to identify high value add or high construction GDP. That is not important. What is more important is to see how the country benefits from construction investments. Okay, so how can we use input-output tables? We can analyze production. You can look at the structure of demand. We can identify export ratios. We can look at employment. You can understand prices and costs. You can also look at how minimum wage will impact construction output. So for example, it's very easy now for you to look at this. This is construction. Where's construction? Okay, look at this. Your kompensasi tenaga kerja is 14%. Okay? Kompensasi tenaga kerja or your wages is 14%. So if you wish, you could double wages. How much would your construction cost increase? So if you double wages, your construction cost will increase by 14%. Correct? Does that make sense? Because your construction cost is about 14%. If you double that, it's going to go up by 1.14. So your construction here, instead of 1, will become 1.14. So that's a very simple way for you to analyze impact of anything. Now, if you have energy, right? Look at that, pengadaan listrik and gas. What if you decide, or what if the government decides to double the price of energy? You can very quickly work out what is the impact of, so if you double energy, construction increase will be, you take this equals to this plus listrik and gas. So it becomes 1.002. Okay, so it's a very useful tool for you to answer this kind of questions. You can also calculate energy content of different products in intermediate and final demand. You can carry out environmental analysis, and you can also carry out sensitivity analysis. Okay, imports. Okay, let's look at imports. Imports need a little bit of time. When you look at imports, okay, so let's go back to this table here. Let's look at, no, I can't show you this one. This one doesn't work. Let me show you the Australian one. So this is table 5 for the Australian one. And where is construction? Okay, residential construction is here. So I'm going to highlight all that. Yellow Iron and steel is 760. Now, in table 5, we say that $760 million worth of iron and steel is supplied to the residential construction sector. We do not know whether this is manufactured in Australia or imported. Okay, so let me then show you what table 5 says. So in table 5, we call this imports are directly allocated to the industry which use them. All right, imports are directly allocated to the industry which uses them and are included with the primary inputs to these industries. So it's the industry, which use them. So it is not put to the industry that supply them. It is used, it is allocated to the industry that use them. So in table 5, all the imports are put into one line over here. Competing imports. I'm going to use green. So remember, it says industry which use. So the using industry is residential. And residential uses $6,598 million worth of imports to produce 95 billion worth of output. Okay, so table 5 is what we call an direct allocation. So it is directly, my apologies, it is directly allocated to the sector that use. So on P6, import appears as a separate line as a primary input. And that tells us exactly what is the value of all total inputs into the residential construction. Now, there is another figure, another table, that is table 8, which I will open now. Table 8, and I will have to zoom in a little bit and compare. So now I'm looking for 52 iron and steel. So it's 52 iron and steel. Residential is 3. Residential is this one. Can you see that it is now a different number? It is 1029. Iron and steel was 760 over here. It is now 1029 in table 8. But when you scroll down to table 8, there is no more competing imports. So the imports have now been allocated to the sector that produces them, even though they are imported. So over here, line iron and steel manufacturing, this includes domestic production plus imports. Okay. So two different types of figures. One is where the imports are allocated to the user. Second one, table 8, is where the imports are allocated to the supplier. And it has different users. Later on, I'll show you. Now, it's getting very, very complicated now. So please stop. Okay, I'll stop here and you guys ask questions. Can you see the difference? But Bimo, is this clear?
I can barely read that. It's more.
But
Just
Bimo,
listening to what you say.
You need a bigger monitor.
I know.
You haven't seen my other Excel spreadsheets. My other Excel spreadsheets are running
It's much smaller.
Much smaller. No, the file size is bigger. It's something like 60 megabytes. And I cannot open on the computer I bring to Bandung.
Okay.
Because it's not powerful enough. When we start analyzing input-output tables, it becomes very, very slow on the computer. Okay, so I've just shown you how imports can be handled. You can put the imports into one line for the industry which uses them, or you can put the imports into all the industries that supply them. So in this particular case, it is showing the iron and steel, which shows domestic production plus imports. And in this particular case, it is only domestic production, okay? So this is domestic production. And import is given as a separate line here at the bottom. But you cannot tell what is imported because it's just one line. Okay, 2.5 hours. Can you take more of input-output tables? Because I have another lecture on more input-output, but it's going to be even more difficult. So if your head is spinning now, please stop me and we can talk about input-output in more general terms. Questions?
Okay, student, any question?
Students.
Student first.
Students first, of course. Students
I'm an
first.
older student.
Students,
the older
are you confused?
student came later.
Students, I think, are so confused that they are not asking questions.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
Okay. TK, can I use the same input-output from Indonesian economic to determine whether the assumption that the performance of construction should include real estate? The question raised because previously on the book that I sent to you.
Yes, you include construction and real estate as one.
And real estate. The reason is because the Ministry of Public Works now also oversees the real estate sector. So especially, it is not purely the performance of the construction itself, but the performance of the public works and housing, which is under the Ministry of Public Work and Housing. So that's the reason why I put the table that way.
Okay, I understand the reason behind it, but how do they then differentiate between building and infrastructure? Because infrastructure doesn't have real estate.
So that's why, can we use the same input-output table to
No, because
input-output.
Correct. You can because Indonesian input-output tables has real estate as a separate item.
Yeah, separate item.
Yes, as long as it's a separate item. I think your input-output table has 150 different sectors. So if you look at the full input-output table, you have a lot more data. What I'm doing is I'm only showing you 17 because 17 is easy to demonstrate in a class. But if you are really looking at the analysis, you should use 150.
Yeah, same thing with the table in
it's exactly the same analysis, just it will run a lot slower on your computer. Because if you have 150, then your matrix is 150 times 150. It will take forever to jalan. So yes, the short answer is yes, we can continue the analysis and I can help you with the analysis.
TK, can I ask?
Yes, Pak Abdul.
In the table, I think the quarter one table, the real estate doesn't contribute to the fixed asset.
Yes, correct. Real estate doesn't contribute to fixed asset.
So it's not about so it's only sell to the customer, right?
Yes.
Okay. So there is no building asset, yeah?
No building asset. Yes, real estate is not the not creating asset. Yes, they are only transacting the asset, transaction.
So
buy and sell.
Yeah, Pak Bimo mentioned that he wants to combine, yeah. So it's not about the infrastructure, but for construction combined with real estate. Is it okay?
We call that a satellite account. You can have two separate accounts in BPS, but if PUPR wants to look at it as one, yes, it is possible, but the statistic department have to follow United Nations classification. Otherwise, your input-output tables cannot be compared to other countries.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that. What I did on that table is to show the contribution of the ministerial level into the formation of GDP, because Ministry of PUPR also oversees the business of real estate.
Business of real estate, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be very larger if we also consider the value chains of the construction, that they would include the upstream industry for supplier.
Yes. So that's why industries like tourism, you see, tourism doesn't appear in national accounts because tourism doesn't exist as an economic industry. So tourism will have business services, they will have transportation, they will have hotels, food and beverage, hotels, food. So they are all combined, right? But you cannot break them up because the United Nations classification says that hotel is different from tourism. So most national statistics department will create what they call a satellite account for tourism and use that separately to report to the Ministry for Tourism, because tourism doesn't fit in. Tourism is a what you call rojak.
What rojak?
Rojak, a combination. It's a Malay, like it's very similar to your gado-gado.
Oh, okay. Rojak.
It's all a combination.
Okay, rojak. I understand that.
Right, because so it's a mix of everything, and sometimes it's very confusing. So I think construction is another one of those industries that will end up very confusing, because we have real estate. You also have, the more that you do prefabrication, it will then move into manufacturing. For you, you have your engineering and architecture in construction, or is it in jasa? Is it jasa perusahaan?
Jasa perusahaan. That's good. Jasa.
Okay. So it goes into jasa perusahaan. So again, there are various definitions.
Yeah.
Would that be possible to have the same denomination across all nations? So we can compare. So we compare equally.
It's very hard now.
But compare fairly, not equally.
Fairly, yes. So there is a group in the World Bank that does this. So if you have interest, I can introduce you to some of them, and they are the ones looking at this at the World Bank, trying to convince the World Bank to come up with a different measure for construction. Because construction is very hard. We don't even define repair and maintenance uniformly across countries. right? Because your data, what is this? Konsumsi rumah tangga is 0 for construction. So how can that be? Cannot be, because you have to repair your houses, you have to repair your schools. All that is 0. So a lot of information is missing.
Yeah, should be included totally in construction, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fixed asset, yeah.
So we get Wawan to help us figure this out. See, Pak Wawan is now keeping very quiet. He's getting worried that a lot of information, all very confusing. Okay, questions from students, please.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, Abdi.
Okay, you said in the direct coefficient in A matrix below the matrix you shown us, you said that if we double the wages, the total of the total input domestic will be up 1.14. You say that, but what if we double the wages, the output is increased too, because the cost of the construction is increasing too. So it's not 1.14, or what we can conclude about this.
What do you mean by cost of construction will increase? Because kompensasi tenaga kerja is 14%. So if you double that, then instead of your building costing 100 million rupiah, it will go up to 114 million rupiah. So that is just a very simple analysis. If you double your wages, a building that used to be 100 million will become 114 million. Okay. Assuming that your material prices all remain the same. So you are only increasing the wages for construction worker. You are not increasing wages for manufacturing worker.
Okay, I see that.
Okay. So if you have a more detailed input-output tables, you can also try increasing the price of steel, increasing the price of timber. So there is a lot of things that you can do with this. You can even say that, what if you find another material, timber that is half price. So if you can import material half price, then you can see what savings you can produce for the construction industry.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question is in the A matrix. You divided the supply from other sector to construction divided by the total input domestic.
Yes.
If we divide it by the total konsumsi antara, what we can get from that? Each of the supply product to construction divided by the total konsumsi antara. Is that showing us something or what?
No, I don't think so. It doesn't give you much additional information. So the reason I use the value divided by total input domestic is actually very important. There will be further analysis later on where you can see how the analysis is continued. So if you think that you have learned enough, we will have to stop the analysis today, and I will give me about 1 hour or 1.5 hours next week, and I will continue with the analysis, because you see that this is just one small step. Okay, now think about what I've just said. We said that if you were to increase construction output by 100 million rupiah, you will increase Indonesia's economy by 64 million rupiah. Okay, now, but you think about this. If I increase construction, then construction will demand an increase in manufacturing, okay, then manufacturing will also demand an increase in maybe timber. So it is a chain reaction, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
So how do you then work out the chain reaction? That is next week. Minggu depan.
Yeah, we better stop here. Otherwise, their head will be explode.
Yeah. I think last year when I taught the class, all the students' head about to explode. So that's why we had to continue the following week. They say that there is time to continue, but their head cannot take it anymore. Where is Pak Budi? Pak Budi, any other questions, Pak Budi?
No, sir.
Students?
And, yeah. Pak Abdul agree that we can have another session next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So next week, students, please bring the same Excel, and I will continue with the Excel spreadsheet. But if you can, make sure that you've got a big computer screen so you can see everything clearly. But Bimo needs 2 monitors.
No, just need one, the larger one.
Larger one. Any other questions from students? I think it's more important. Students, come on. What do you understand? What do you not understand? Please ask questions.
Or maybe they need to have like another special session, just for students. I think they can discuss with each other. Yeah.
Okay.
Pak Budi mungkin
a group discussion.
They have a group discussion, and then
among students.
I can join in and answer questions if they are not sure about how to do this, because later on I want to show them how to do matrix manipulation. You have done matrices in your engineering degree, but this is a 17 by 17 matrix you cannot solve by hand. Last time we solved 3 by 3 by hand, also get it wrong. Right, Pablo? We always use matrices a long time ago.
Yeah. For
Inverse matrix.
Now is economic
matrix. The agent value and so forth.
Yes, all those eigenvalues. Even high school also we have to calculate all those horrible mathematics.
Yeah.
So now this one is worse. This one is 150 times 150.
Yeah, I think it's better to have like a special session, for students discussing the topics, whether they understand the terms and how to interpret the tables, something like that, by themselves. Maybe help by Pak Budi, only if Pak Budi needs your assistant, maybe he can call you.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll stop here and then I'll see you next week.
Okay.
Okay, TK, before you leave, I send you a message through your WhatsApp application. I'm just wondering, we can use the same principle of input-output metric to trace how the technology influenced the industry.
Yes. The only problem is your BPS.
The only problem is the data.
Very slow. Data is very slow. Yes, BPS is very slow.
I know.
Australia is 3 years. We produce the input-output tables within 3 years. Indonesia, I think, is taking 10 years.
5 years, I think, Should be 5 years.
Should be 5. Yeah, should be 5. So I think last year the students were calling BPS, asking for the 2015 data. Maybe they have the 2015, but definitely not sooner than that.
Yeah,
They have to write a proposal to the government, creating a new input-output table to show how to influence BPS into the economy. So if you invest 100 rupiah to BPS, you'll get returns on other.
Yes.
Right? Because data is still a luxury for Indonesian, but we somehow disregard them. I mean, most of decisions are based on the intuition or just roughly comparing ourselves with other nations. So not based on the fact.
Correct. But if your BPS takes many years to produce this, then it's also of no value, because by the time it is
it's
history. It's history. Right.
It's history.
Yeah, it's still useful. Okay, still useful for teaching.
Correct.
So
correct.
A friend of mine talk about how to use technology and so forth. So when we teach technology, we teach something in the future. If we talk about past, we talk about anthropology.
Yes.
Not about technology.
Okay.
Thank you,
very good.
PK.
Okay, very good.
I'm waiting for your comment on my proposal.
Yes, I'll reply to you very shortly. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, students.
See you.
Bye.
Okay, keep healthy.
Thank you very much,
and
Tiki.
safe.
You too. Bye-bye.
Semuanya, sampai jumpa.
Ya, terima kasih Pak.
Budi, besok ada sidang ya?
Ada Pak,
proposal.
jam 10.